In honor of the veterans who have served our country, both past and present, First National Bank, a Franklin family community bank, proudly sponsors Veterans of the Valley. Since 1862, First National has provided local decision-making and accessibility, as well as banking products and services to Brazos Valley citizens.
Welcome to another edition of Veterans of the Valley. He was born during the Depression years in Jenkins, Kentucky, just north of Harlan County. His mother was a nurse and his dad was a coal miner. He says they were the quintessential hillbillies, just like you'd see in a movie. And yes, they did owe their souls to the company store, just like the line in the song 16 Tons says, written by Merle Travis back in '47 and made famous by Tennessee Ernie Ford in 1955. He joined the Marine Corps in 1948 at the ripe old age of 17, stayed in for 1 year, was out of the Marines for about 8 months when he got called back up on 27 July 1950. And on 15 September 1950, less than 2 months later, he made the landing at Incheon, Korea with 5th Marines. Veterans of the Valley welcomes Hugh Shockey, U.S. Marine, to today's show. Mr. Shockey, thank you for being with us.
It's nice to be here, Kyle. Thank you.
Tell us what it was like right then. You got called back up, and within just a month and a half, you were making the transition and stepping off into Korea.
Well, in July of 1950, when they called me on active duty and thousands of other Marines, it was to fill the void that the Marine Corps had because it had been cut back so deeply after World War II. And those of us that had any experience in the Marine Corps at all were eligible for combat in some form or fashion. Mm-hmm. And so we all went to Camp Pendleton, California, and they processed us medically and physically and checked our personnel records and determined that I was to go to Korea in the next week or two. And we arrived in Camp Pendleton on August the 2nd, and on August the 13th, I was aboard ship headed for Korea. Me and 5,000 other Marines on that ship. And we landed in Kobe, Japan, and disembarked from that ship and embarked another ship and went to Busan, Korea on the 3rd of August. No, that date's wrong, on the 3rd of September. And boarded another ship, and when we boarded that ship, the troops that were on my ship were designated as the 5th Marines, and we joined the 1st Marine Brigade, which is a Marines unit that was in Korea at the time, and suddenly we then became the 5th Marine Regiment of the 1st Marine Division, and so we went on and made the landing at Incheon as the 5th Marines. And it was we didn't have much opposition at Incheon, not where I was, although the island was, the Wamido was the island we landed on, which was north of the city of Incheon. And there were some anxious moments because they had such a high tide there that we went in at high tide, and at low tide it's 30 feet shallower, and there's just mud flats for miles out into the ocean. And there are ships sitting there high and dry.
So anybody on land, for people coming in from boats or something to help support, you just have to wait.
You just had to wait till the tide came back in. And when the tide came back in, we went on and moved from the island across the little bay, a bridge, and onto the mainland. And from there we moved north through Pohang was the name of one of the towns. We took Kempo Airfield, which is on the south side of the Han River. On the north side of the Han River is the city of Seoul. We went across the river without any opposition to speak of, and eventually took the city of Seoul. Mm-hmm. And about 1 month after we landed at Incheon, on or about the 16th of October, we left Incheon, headed south, and boarded ships, and went around the southern tip of the peninsula to make what was going to be the landing at Wonsan. Well, we weren't able to make our landing timely because there's so many mines out in the water. The minesweepers had a tough time cleaning that water up for us to get in. So by the time we got in, that Wonsan had been secured. And so much to the point that Bob Hope had already had a USO show there before we got there.
And y'all were still sitting out in the back.
Yeah, we're out in the water, and he's having a show. And and Bob Hope used that line many times in one of his shows. This is, I'm Bob, I met you at Wonsan Hope. Anytime he was appearing before Marines, and they all knew what that meant. And from there, we began our trek north to the Chosin Reservoir. Had a lot of opposition going up there.
What was that like?
Well, it was just cold. I mean, the farther we went north and the higher in elevations we went to, the temperature just got bitterly cold. I mean, it was so cold that the way you describe it, the effect it has on you is life begins to take on slow motion. You think in slow motion, you act in slow motion. You don't know it, but you are doing this. And that's the kind of effect that cold weather has on you. And besides that, we did not have the best gear for cold weather. We didn't have thermal boots that year. We had what we called shoe packs, which were just rubber-soled boots that were about calf high, and they were made out of leather and fabric. So once that gets wet, you know, you're dead to water. And if you don't keep your feet dry, you're going to get frostbite real quick. So much of the time we were taking our socks off, drying our feet off, putting dry socks off, putting our wet socks inside our jackets and our shirts around our body heat so that we could dry them out, so the next time we need some dry socks, we'd use them, we'd swap it out. And we got up on the east side of the Chosin Reservoir, the 5th Marines did, and we set up our defensive positions, and shortly after we got there, we were relieved by the 31st Regiment of the 7th Army Division, and we were pulled out from the east side of the Chosin Reservoir and sent to the north and west side of the northwest side of the Chosin Reservoir, where the 7th Marines were already there, and 7th Marine Regiment. And that's when, shortly after Thanksgiving, the Chinese broke through. And it was tough. I mean, there were just Chinese everywhere. We called them chinks. In deference to the North Koreans, we call those gooks. I've been, you know, politically incorrect speaking like that, but that's history says that's the way it was. And we were pulled from we began to withdraw, but we were surrounded on all sides. And this winding mountain road from to Hagaroo, which was at the southern tip of the reservoir, and we're in the northwestern edge, goes through a thing called Tongkong Pass. And the 5th Marines, 7th Marines had left a group there to keep that pass open for us. And boy, those guys did a heck of a job. They lost a lot of men, but they kept that group, that pass open, so that 2 regiments of Marines and all their equipment and the Marines and the dead Marines could be pulled out of there. We made it with a whole lot of you know, a lot of suffering, and the cold was just terrible, and the Chinese were everywhere. And we got down to Hagaroo, and that is where the whole division then joined together to make its last about 40-mile march down the mountains to Ham Hung, which is on the coast of North Korea. And in the process of doing this, we had to break roadblocks that ever wind and turn in the road. As we would go around to make this curve from left to right, we had to knock off the enemy on this hill so we could make the turn and go back to the next turn. And those guys were climbing up and down those mountains.
So it would be move a little, stop and fight a little, move a little,
just forever stop. The train would just stop. And here's what I'd like to put General Ray Murray in the story. General Ray Murray was a lieutenant colonel commanding a 5th Marine Regiment at that time, the only lieutenant colonel commanding a Marine regiment in all the Marine Corps. And he's an Aggie. He was a 1935 graduate of Texas A&M, and boy, was he a Marine's Marine. This guy saved a lot of Marines' lives, just walking up and down this train where guys were just sitting down, just dead tired, sitting in, you know, freezing weather, like 35 below zero with a wind chill maybe as high as 60. And he'd kick guys in the butt and get them up and make them move. So they would, 30 minutes you sit down and freeze to death. And he spent a lot of time doing that. And, you know, he could have just been sitting in a warm Jeep somewhere with a heater on, but not Ray Murray, not Ray Murray. He died recently, and the Marine Corps lost a great man in him. Anyway, we came out of there and eventually boarded ship at Hung Nam, went down around the peninsula again to Mason, Korea. And that's where the 1st Marine Division reconnoitered, got our strength back up. We called it the Bean Patch. And there are a lot of stories about the Bean Patch that I could tell you sometime later. One of them is politically significant today, but we'll leave that as it is right now.
We'll leave that for another show.
Yeah. But we in about 30 days, we got our Marine Division back in shape. And we moved north. And one of our jobs for the first month was just clearing up what we call line crossers. So you couldn't tell the difference between the North Korean and the South Korean. How do you tell somebody from North Dallas and South Dallas?
Right.
You can't do that. So these people all looked alike, and these guys were line crossers, and they were blowing up things behind us. So our job was to clean them up. We'll do whatever we had to do to get them out of there. And we were able to do that. We started putting curfews on people. After 6 o'clock. If you weren't in a compound and you were civilian, you might be shot.
Right.
So we built compounds for them. Facilities for them to live in. We fed them. They were safe, and that's how we cleaned that mess up. One little side story about that is, I looked over in one of these places one day, and inside this fence, sitting by a big old potbelly open cauldron, boiling water. I don't know what they had in it, and this little Korean kid, might be 2 years old, no clothes on, snotty nose, and I'm thinking, you know, boy, I sure wouldn't want to look out my back window in my backyard and see that happening. Maybe that's one of the reasons we're here. I don't know. Right. We never thought about that much. We were just doing our job, and but from then on, the Marines and the 8th Army just kept pushing the enemy north, and in July of 1951, I was a wireman with the 5th Marines, and I was up at on the hill with 1st Battalion, and we had to lay the communications line between our regimental to the next unit down, which was the battalion. And one of my jobs when I got to battalion was to see if the battalion needed anybody in communications to help them get their communications in and installed before nightfall, because we were moving out every day.
Right.
And that one day I was needed, so I went up to the company on the hill, and they had an OP with a machine gun sitting out, probably 75 yards from platoon leader's position, and they said they wanted to run a telephone line from platoon leader's position to the machine gun nest, and it was a sound power telephone. It's just a battery operated on both ends, so through a 2-pair wire running between them, and you've seen people talk through the cans, you know. Well, this was a battery powered, so they could transmit, verbiage through it. Well, I get out there, and the Koreans were real good with a 180 mortar. I mean, a 120 millimeter mortar. They could shoot those things like rifles. They were really sharp, and they put one right in the middle of that machine gun nest.
The one you were in?
When I'm in there, put this telephone. I'm just there picking 2 wires on the telephone. Really, that's all I had to do. But while I was there, direct hit that thing. There were 4 guys in there, me and 3 of the machine gunner and his 2 helpers and me. And it just collapsed that thing. It had sandbags on top of it and everything that they had built there to secure themselves. And they overran that position. And the Marines didn't get back on the hill for 2 days. And I'm in that hole under all that sandbags and all that stuff, and I was the only one that survived come out of there.
And you were probably 18 years old?
Yeah.
Had you made 18 by then?
Oh yeah, I was 18. It was 18 in December previous. But yeah, that's what Marines do, and that's what I did. And I knew they'd be back, man. I just knew, there wasn't any doubt in my mind. My buddies would come and get me. And for 2 days, I heard Chinese spoke around me, or Korean. I don't know which one, but I don't remember that. But finally,
so you could actually hear them outside?
Oh, I could hear them talking. Yeah, they drug that gun out of that hole there. I didn't see them do it. I could hear them do it because I couldn't see anything. And the guys came back, took that hill, dug me out of there. I went by to see the corpsman.
Oh, you did tell me earlier, though, in our interview that basically you kind of gave a little bit of a signal once you heard the Americans come back.
Yeah, they Marines hymn means a lot of things to a lot of people. Marine hymn means Marines around somewhere. When I heard these guys talking, when I first heard English after 2 days, I started singing a Marines hymn and they dug me out. That's how they knew I was in there. I never said it's made a sound while the Chinese or the Koreans were there. There wasn't any reason for me to be a prisoner of theirs, and I just knew my guys would come and get me.
I can imagine the looks on their faces. They hear this muffled sound of someone singing the Marine hymn from.
They probably thought it was a drunk Marine somewhere, but I hadn't had anything to eat or drink for 2 days, and but I was in good shape. I went to the corpsman. They gave me a couple of shots of something, and I went and got a hot meal, and that was it. I was on my way to do my job, and shortly after that I came home, and I went to Oakland Naval Hospital. And I had amoebic dysentery, so they kept me there about 3 weeks. And I got on Liberty one day, and this is my little final story probably. There was a guy who came to Korea and gave a show for the USO. His name was Earl Garner. Earl Garner's a piano player.
Right.
And I just loved Earl Garner's music. His touch on the piano was just something that would just captivate me. And he played a song called Misty.
Right.
And but he had never written any words for it. Said he was going to write some words for it someday, but anyhow, he didn't know when. So I'm at Oakland Naval Hospital. I go on Liberty. They give us passes when we go out of that hospital to any place in town. Free this, free that, and free everything. And one of my passes was to the Top of the Mark. That's Mark Hopkins Hotel in San Francisco.
Pretty ritzy place.
Oh yeah, real ritzy. And I go up there, and who is playing the piano? Who is entertainer that night? But Earl Garner on the piano. And middle of the afternoon or the evening, he said, "Folks, I have something I'd like to announce. I've never written the words to this song, Misty. And Johnny Mathis one time asked me if you ever write words that I'd like to sing it. So folks, tonight for the first time, Johnny Mathis is going to sing Misty."
Wow.
And he played Misty. Well,
and you happened to be there.
I happened to be there. So the Lord was with me a second time. So who knows? There I was, back home safe, and I got out of the Marine Corps off of active duty, and about 9 months later, the Army wanted to draft me in Little Rock. That's where I was from. And they said the reason they wanted to draft me was that their pool of eligible draft age men had been diminished by, one of the reasons was all the Marines they called on active duty in 1950. And I said, "You're not going to do that to me." So I went to the Marine Corps and I said, "Look, I want to come back in the Marine Corps. They're going to draft me." And they said, "Okay." So they made me a sergeant. And I went back in the Marine Corps.
Go back where you came from.
So I ended up being at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. I ended up being a comm chief there, and I went on recruiting duty, and I recruited Marine officers in Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois at the universities for the Marines officer program, Reserve officer program, and I had a great life. And today, I've been a Marine, and I'll always be a Marine, and I love the Corps, and
once a Marine, always a Marine. Absolutely. That's right. We've got some pictures that you were polite enough to let us borrow and scan in for us. Let's take a look at them here, and if you can tell us what each of these are.
Well, that's a picture when I was on recruiting duty in Indianapolis.
And which one are you?
I'm the one to the right of the girl. If you're looking at the picture, it'll be just to the left of the girl.
Okay.
And I'm the tallest one there.
With that big smile.
Yeah, yeah, I was happy as a pig in mud. We had elected this girl Miss Battle Cry. The movie Battle Cry came out when I was on recruiting duty, and we said, well, we'll get a little publicity in town. And so we went together and had a Miss Battle Cry contest citywide, and this young lady won it. Those are just some fellows that were on recruiting duty with me.
Okay, there you go.
That picture.
Now that is the quintessential Marine, right there.
That picture was taken at Parris Island. When I was in recruiter school, they released that for publication to your hometowns with articles or something like that. I don't think they ever released it in my hometown. I don't think anybody ever saw that before but me. But that was in 1951.
Okay, where are we at here?
No, that was in 52. That's around That's just north of Pohang in Korea. That was taken probably in February, I guess, of 1951. The guy in the middle is Freddie Lee Sturdivant, a good friend of mine from Kyle, Texas.
And you have a good story about him, I believe, that where Freddie was wounded in a quite a different place.
Freddie is on my wire team, and we worked as pairs. We each run
Explain
shotgun.
what a wire team is.
Yeah, a wire team is usually made up of two guys that end up work together to lay telephone lines, generally on the ground in combat, from a higher echelon down to a lower echelon. And in our case, we were at a regiment, so we were laying telephone communications to the battalions below us and to other units that were lateral to us, to the right or to the left, who were not necessarily Marines. They could be whatever unit was to your immediate right and
It was
left.
just your job to get communications to them.
Our job was to see they always had telephone communications, and it worked. If it didn't work, you had to go troubleshoot them. And that's what Fred and I were doing one day. Fred and I had laid a lateral telephone line from one of our battalion companies on a hill, down a hillside about 600 meters and up about 700 meters to an Army unit
Those are
on
long
the next
runs.
hill. Oh yeah, and down below this, at the bottom of this hill and between these two hills was a fast-running creek river that had a swinging bridge over it. So as we were moving down that hill, we would do about 100 to 150 yards at a time, and I would be the guy out, and he would be shotgunning for me. Then he would move out and check the next 150 yards, and I'd shotgun for him. Well, we get down to the bottom of the hill, and Fred's turned his shotgun down to over this bridge, and he's standing down over this bridge, pulling up a looped wire that we had looped down, so if anybody walking on the bridge wouldn't tear it. And as he was bending over, I heard this shot, and Freddie fell off the bridge.
So you were about 100, 150 yards behind.
I was up on the side of the hill, probably 100 yards from him, and about 100 yards probably. And Freddie disappeared. And as I see this, we had trained ourselves, to take care of the environment and be aware of what's happening around us. And I saw this puff of smoke come out of this tree, about 50 yards up the other side of this hill. And so I just emptied a 30-round clip from a carbine, just emptied it, and no more fire coming from that side of the hill. And then I called him and I said, hey Fred, where are you, stud? And way down, sounding like from way off in the distance, he said, hey, Shock, they got me in the butt. So I go down to get him, pull him out. He's got grazed. We put a bandage on him, took him back. They put another bandage on him. He never went to see a doctor.
Getting shot in the posterior is not that big of a deal for a Marine.
It did get you out. He wasn't about to go back to the sick bay or to the MASH hospital, because if you went to a MASH hospital, it was terrible. I mean, you had to pick up cigarette butts where people made messes, and you don't do that in a field, and we didn't want to have to go through that, so we did everything we could do.
It's better to
keep
stay
them
up front.
going. Yeah, better to be where we were. That's true, but that's one of those stories that happens to us whenever we keep our sanity.
Let's get back at the pictures here. We've got about 4 minutes left. Now, explain this picture, because I'm sure everybody's wondering what in the world this is.
Well, I'll tell you what that is.
And you're the gentleman in the back.
I'm the little guy. The big fat faced fella is Al Reddig, and Al was from Oklahoma City. He was a big Indian. I think that picture was taken in San Diego. We left the bar at the U.S. Grant Hotel in San Diego, headed probably for another bar, and there was one of those photographic things.
One of those photographic booths.
And I think we got in. I think that's where that was taken. That was taken in the summer of 1950. That picture was taken at Camp Pendleton whenever we were organizing to go aboard ship to head for Korea. And,
so this is after they had called you back, and you were probably just a few days or so from aboard the ship.
It was probably the first 2 or 3 days that we were. We lived in Quonset huts in the old place called Tent Camp 2. That's what we called it then. And that one was taken at the same time. Yeah, that one was taken at the same time.
Okay.
That picture was taken aboard ship on the way to Korea at a Navy galley. They call them galleys, mess hall. And that table is a long, narrow metal top table with sides, with lips on the side. You could see they're about 2 inches high, and we put our trays on there, and one guy's down on one side, and one guy's down on the other side of the table, and maybe 20 guys on each side, this long table, and it keeps the trays from falling off when the ship's in rough water.
Okay. What's this picture?
That's a picture that was taken in Mason, I think. I think it was taken in Mason, Korea in the spring, right after just before we went back online in January or February of 1951.
Okie doke.
That's the picture on the bow of a ship headed, I said before, I think that was headed for Korea aboard the APA that we left San Diego on. And I can tell it because I was smoking there, and I still smoke. I got that bad habit. But I was one of the few guys that could light a cigarette on the bow of that ship with the wind blowing like it would.
This has got to be one of the neatest pictures I think I've seen.
That's an artist rendition that was shot from a positive. It is a negative of a positive. And I thought it would be neat to do that. I was in the printing business, and we did that and used that for some publication that we were doing for the Marines. And I just thought it was a nice rendition. Kind of shows the white from that. It's a rendition of the Marines coming out of the reservoir. It was taken whenever the snow was on the ground.
Hugh, we've got just 1 minute left. I would like to thank you for being here today. Wish we had more time. We'll get you to come back and tell us some more of your stories about the Battle of Chosin Reservoir. Thank you for being here.
Kyle, appreciate your time. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. It's
Call
our
me
pleasure.
anytime.
Absolutely. Hugh Shockey was born in the mountains of western Kentucky. He grew up in Arkansas, and by the time he was 18, he was a combat-hardened Marine, making a landing at Incheon, Korea, and taking part in one of the most storied battles of the Korean conflict, the Battle of Chosin Reservoir, which pitted approximately 30,000 U.S. troops against a Chinese contingent of over 200,000. The U.S. Marines consider the Battle of Chosin Reservoir to be one of the proudest parts of their own history. The Marines mauled the Chinese divisions they faced so badly that the Chinese had to be withdrawn from the front. The Marines then marched out, and in an orderly fashion and intact. This is the indomitable spirit that is the United States Marine Corps. Shake a service member's hand when you see them. Thank them for the commitment they have made, no matter what branch of the service they have chosen. For Hugh Shockey, Tom Turbyville, and the entire KMU TV crew, I'm Kyle Netterville. Thank you for watching Veterans of the Valley.
In honor of the veterans who have served our country, both past and present, First National Bank, a Franklin family community bank, proudly sponsors Veterans of the Valley. Since 1862, First National has provided local decision-making and accessibility, as well as banking products and services to Brazos Valley citizens.